everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Triple Option Podcast. I'm your co-host Tarun Duglu, along with Abhi Dingery and Nate Autry. Today we're talking about the exciting new upcoming of the USFL, what we are looking forward to, what players we want to watch, and maybe we'll even talk about some of the pitfalls. Do comment and tell your friends about this podcast. And without further ado, let's get into it. So first, I think the exciting about past leagues, such as the AAU and XFL, were players that we were excited to watch. I know each of us have players that we're excited to watch. All right, Nate, why don't you start with your favorite player that you want to watch in this new league?
Yeah, so for me, it was easy. I saw Jordan Teamu, which was a standout quarterback at Ole Miss for 2 years. He was second in the SEC in passing yards. And that was fun. So, anyways, I saw him getting drafted. Like it was second overall, and so I knew he's gonna be my favorite player to watch. Obviously, he was a good quarterback at Ole Miss. 2 years ago, he was a successful quarterback in the XFL, where he was rated. I think he won Player of the Week several times, and he was widely regarded as the second best quarterback in that league. So it'll be interesting to see what he does going forwards. He's from Hawaii and he's a dual threat quarterback. So yeah.
Yeah, and my favorite player that I'm looking forward to at least, y'all know me as the Texas fan of this podcast, Brandon Eagles, little known player out of Texas, was really supposed to play more of a Cam Newton role, and for those of y'all who really love college football, more of a Nick Marshall role, like more of a run first quarterback. Didn't really work out for him. I think while he is a later round pick, I think he could make an impact just because of his on his athleticism alone, which typically isn't as like prevalent in these sort of startup leagues. So honestly, that's my short and sweet description of why I'm looking forward to Brandon Eagles.
Yep. And so yeah, finally we got Obby's pick
Yeah,
of who he thinks will be the most exciting player to watch.
So personally, I picked Last Chance U legend John Franklin III, who definitely bounced around in college, and with his recent success with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers winning a Super Bowl, and the fact that he reportedly runs a 4.1940 in a startup league like this, I think he will definitely blossom. I think his speed and athleticism will definitely be something that separates him from all the other receivers in the league, as well as the fact that he's reuniting with another Lane Kiffin product in Jordan Teamu. So that connection would definitely mean something.
Well, technically Jordan Ta'amu didn't go to Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, but again, it is interesting. Ole Miss was a powerhouse at that time.
That is
And
true.
just
My
to
bad.
reiterate, the teams that these players will be playing for, Ole
yeah.
Miss will be playing for the Tampa Bay Bandits.
Oh yeah, and Brandon Eagles will be playing for the Philadelphia Stars.
Yep. And you can see John Franklin III, as Albie already said, will also be playing for the Tampa Bay Bandits. So interesting to see. Next up, we have things we would like to look forwards to in the USFL. So things that we think are interesting or unique to the league.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that spring football itself is something I was very excited about. I just, I think for the longest time, I think both of y'all will agree with me, is that spring football has been a very untapped market because you have to understand the two shortest seasons in American sports are college football and NFL football, and they cover the same time period. So there's a large stretch of time where there really isn't much of a football product to watch. We've seen in the past the AAU was getting somewhere, but they ran out of money. The XFL was getting somewhere, then COVID happened. I think the USFL has the potential to be that league and could bring spring football and could create spring football as like a constant product. So our only entertainment isn't, spring off-season hype and such.
And I would like to agree with Tarun in saying like this is the longest offseason in any given sport in American sports. And it's crazy because it's, in my opinion, I think it generally is the most popular sport. And so, you have 100 days of season and then 200 days of off season. And during those 200 days, sometimes fans will switch around to other sports, but like eventually everyone will get bored. And so you start covering things like trades or transfers, or if you're in college football, you're covering recruiting and spring football. But it's not the same as, watching games, watching action every year, every weekend. And so I think, like Turn said in the past, there have been several leagues. I think the XFL was probably going to fill that void before COVID, really took its toll on the league. But yeah, I'm excited to see how the USFL works out and fills this gap of content for American audiences.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see some spring football. Football season is a magical time throughout the year, and that massive gap, especially after the draft, that dead zone of content for football is just horrible. So it's definitely great to see a lot of these athletes compete, especially because a lot of these players will get noticed by NFL teams and most likely get picked up.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. Is that like, and that's like that's not necessarily the same as like spring like a gap of content, but another good thing that this league provides is it's almost like a feeder system for players to try and make their way into an NFL roster. Because, in the past, if you don't make and one of the 53-man rosters in the NFL, maybe you're lucky and you're part of like the 10 to 12, like 10, 20 guys that are on a practice squad. But that's such an incredibly small number for the amount of people that come out of college playing football. And so you never know if you're going to be undiscovered talent or just someone who's unnoticed. And so I think that, by adding a whole league with 8 new teams and lots of games and film and opportunities to show who you are as a player to NFL teams can really hopefully give more players a chance to make it to the NFL and achieve the career they want to have.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting you brought up how it could almost be like a feeder system to the NFL. I'm not 100% sure about that claim for the only reason being that I don't know how much of a role. It's like let's assume the USFL is successful and continues for a multitude of seasons. I'm not really sure how much of a role it can take from the NCAA. Like, do you think it just plays a role like the NBA G League, where it's like there isn't like an insane rate of players going from the USFL and having successful NFL careers, but there is at least a pipeline? Because if I remember correctly, didn't the NFL like purchase a stake in the XFL, or like there are at least calls to do so?
Yeah, I think that NFL is trying to develop XFL for that, like to be their feeder system. So I think if I were to compare it, I would look at soccer, particularly European soccer, where you have like unlike America, you have multiple levels of competition. For example, in England, you have all the way up from Premier League, which is top tier, 20 teams. Then you go Championship, League One, League Two, League Three, and then they have like North and South National Leagues. So that's like there right there is 6 leagues of teams. And so what that does is that's a lot more players playing soccer. And so although it may not be like the perfect system of like providing constant like over and over again providing stars. It provides more people with an opportunity to play the game at a high level. So yeah, I think that's interesting. And so like in the past in the United States, you've had players go to the CFL, which is like that's a common trend. You look at Doug Flutie, he's like probably the most one of the most famous players to do that. And so I mean that's hard though, but there's different rules and everything. But again, like it's just another opportunity for players to showcase their talent. So yeah, and then like building off of like the CFL, like the CFL has different rules, like larger end zones, different placement of the field goals, but the USFL, like the XFL over the years, has its own special rules, and so I think that's one of the things that I'm more excited to see going forwards. And so this image shows several of those different rule changes. So like firstly, as you can see in the top left, if you're looking at this on the video, one of the one I'm and personally the one that I'm most excited about is that instead of doing the NFL overtime or the college overtime, which they aren't perfect, especially the NFL overtime. That's an entire discussion that I don't think we need to talk about because I think Tarun will probably get upset and talk for an hour. I would say that
You know it.
yeah, the XFL has decided to do a best of 3 shootout of 2 point. I think it's 2 point attempts from 2 yards, or it might be 10 yard attempts. I'm not sure one of the two. But basically, each team is guaranteed 3 chances to attack and try to score, and then after that,
Yeah,
so it's basically a penalty shootout.
yeah. I don't know if I like the two attempts though. The 2 yard line.
I
If
think
it college football,
it's a 10 yard line. I may be wrong. I'm not entirely sure.
like if it's 10 yard line, even then, I feel like college football kind of got it right when they said 25, because like I feel like that distance leaves a perfect balance between like unless you massively screw up, you're basically guaranteed to score, but it creates that incentive to take risks to get to the end zone versus taking the field goal. While if you're at the 2 or even the 10, it kind of it kind of limits the game in a lot of ways that playing starting from the 25 doesn't really.
So
You know what I mean?
I'm checking with the rules right now. It currently says that USFL overtimes will feature a best of three scoring format where each offense will get the ball at the opponent's 2 yard line. So that
So yard
is
line.
definitely something. So essentially, every possession in overtime is a goal line stand.
So it's
Well,
basically
Yeah,
run your best play.
yeah,
And so I think, I mean, I think one of the things that you look at NFL overtime, the reason it's so short is because they want to keep that overtime as short as possible. And I agree with you, too. I think like the way that college football overtime used to be is the best. I mean, you look at the LSU A&M 7 overtime game. That's iconic. That's a classic. That's gonna live on for a long time as one of the greatest
yeah.
footballs to ever be watched.
And to speak
But
to a game I
if you
personally
watch
I
that
watched.
live, yeah, I was watching as well. And if you're watching that game live, the players were dead tired. I mean, it was getting ugly. And so I think this is, I mean, I think that this is a good balance of, it provides multiple chances and it showcases like it gives all of the parts of your team, a chance to affect the outcome. But it also,
Yeah,
it doesn't draw on too long and risk injury or anything like that.
yeah. It's the perfect balance between like playing the role of a business and playing the role of like an entertainment product. And like I think like as a fanatic complainer of things, I think this rule kind of plays as like a gotcha. Was like as a fan, say if I'm a fan of the Houston Gamblers, right? And if we lose in overtime, there's not really an argument for me to say to call for a rules change because in theory we had three chances to win this game. Unlike the Cowboys fan I am, always shitting on the overtime rules, right? So I think it establishes a better playing ground, a better it paints the league in a better light. I think that was a very smart move from a pure optics standpoint.
Yeah, I'd agree. So another rule change that they're implementing, which is a little strange, but nevertheless, they've decided that I think I don't know if it's instead of or you have the option to, but I'll just say instead of because I'm not sure. Instead of doing an onside kick, you have the option to do a 4th and 12 play from your own 33-yard line in order
It's
to
a
regain
it's
possession.
either or.
It's either or. So yeah, you can do an onside
I'm
kick,
pretty sure, yeah.
or you can do a 4th and 12 play from your own
Yeah,
33-yard line and try to score,
sorry,
which I think is interesting.
this rule's stupid. Like if it has to be 4th and 20 at the least.
Yeah, I don't know.
Cause
It kind of goes against the whole argument of making games shorter because if you're gonna make getting the ball back that relatively easy, I mean, because you look at onside kicks and it's practically impossible. Like it never happens. Like you literally like never. I think it's like the percentages are extremely low.
like honestly, do you want to think would be a better rule? I think instead of like having to have the football travel 10 yards to touch it, I think having to have it travel 8 or like 7.5 will both make it more incentivized and make it a more entertaining product and make it a more entertaining thing, right? Because like a short distance means there's. Say it again.
I was gonna say like I like the idea of trying to make it a play rather than like this whole separate niche thing of like a kick with like you let the ball skip or bounce or roll or whatever and you try to recover it.
Well, yeah.
I mean that's not football. I mean if you want to make possession, I mean I like the idea of deciding it based on possession. I don't
Well,
know. How do you?
but there's something like unique about like an onside kick, right? Like I feel like like I feel like a good game keeps its niche things, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah, I mean yeah, that's true. That's traditions, right?
yeah, and I think like I feel like the onside kick is something we should implement because like it's such an exciting moment, and I don't think even a 4th and 20 can replicate like an onside kick. And then granted, onside kick with the ball having to travel 10 yards can be boring, but I think even if you reduce that to 7 or 8, I think that makes that itself a lot more of an entertaining product, and that's still a lot more difficult than a 4th and 12.
Yeah. So the third rule change that they've implemented is, I think it's kind of wild. They've decided to add that you can do 2 forward passes behind the line of scrimmage, and I think that they have to be consecutive. So 2 consecutive forward passes behind the line of scrimmage, which that's gonna open
Um,
the road for all sorts of crazy, silly plays.
my question is
yeah.
how much does that get utilized, especially with like many of these coaches just being traditional college coaches or just having some NFL experience? Do they really utilize both forward passes rather than just sticking with their regular like one forward pass or just no forward passes at all from behind the scrimmage.
Yeah, like, do you know what I really want to see?
What?
What is that?
Honestly, I one rule like this would be an experimental thing because I think that USFL is effectively an experimental league. I kind of want to see like the effect of like not the entire game, but maybe like last 2 minutes of a half, saying like, hey, you can have one chance to throw a forward pass in front of the line of scrimmage, like not one per play, one opportunity total.
Oh, that would be so controversial. That would be the most controversial rule change if they did that. Think
I
about
know.
it.
I'm just like it's just like it's just food for thought more than a recommendation.
Yeah, I will say that about the 2-4 passes, like I think it's very on brand for, like I said, like what the USFL is trying to be, because I think it is trying to be an experimental league. Yeah, they're taking advantage of the fact that they're new and they're not established, and they're trying to, change things up. They're trying to make it more exciting, and so I think anyone, all of us can agree that a pass play or any given play involving 2-4 passes is going to be something we've never seen before, and just absolutely wild.
Yeah.
With this in mind, do you think teams are going to try to run formations where they can have two quarterbacks, like they sub in a quarterback at a receiver position, then run a trick play where the actual quarterback throws to their receiver quarterback and then they run the offense from there? Do you think that's a strategy
I,
that could be used here?
I
I
think
think
that's why
I'll be.
I think that's why Tampa Bay drafted John Franklin third.
I
I
really
think
hope.
that
I
probably
hope
his
so.
purpose.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, that can
Like
you imagine that? Like two quarterback sets. I remember like a couple years ago, this is for Ole Miss fans if anyone's like actually listening, but like we had two quarterbacks, Matt Corral, obviously, and John Rice Plumlee, and then there was a big debate like, oh, who's gonna start? And the question was never really answered. And so you see several times where they'd both line up in the backfield because John Rice Plumlee was so effective as a runner. But just see that happen in the XFL, and then not just be like a run only thing, like having two guys that can legit pass the ball to each other and then down the field. Oh my gosh. That'd be crazy.
I wonder if we're ever going to see like the USFL version of like the Heisman option where like the Ravens used to run Lamar, Robert Griffin III, and Mark Ingram in a triple option, but Lamar would be a running back. I wonder if there's going to be some type of freaky offensive sets that are experimented with here. 'Cause it
We could
definitely
hope. We
could.
can only hope,
With
right? We can only hope.
yeah, they have the
I
athletes.
mean, I wouldn't be too confident in that because I think like obviously it's a lot of great names and a lot of great coaches. That coaching in XFL, including Bob Stoops, the second greatest coach in Big 12 history. Yes, Abby, I did take that shot. But I think because it's a bunch of old heads, I don't think there's going to be that much innovation as we all hope, which is kind of like like something I wish they would have hired younger coaches for.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
Like I
mean,
feel like someone like a Sark or a Lincoln Riley, or like not like those coaches, but like someone with their like philosophy, even Lane Kiffin, who just like love to mess around with the offense. I feel like they would fit in a lot more of an offensive friendly league than Bob Stoops.
well, you can't say they're not trying to encourage it, right? And then, building off of that, I
Yeah,
guess.
they definitely are. They're definitely nudging.
Yeah, I will definitely say that I think USFL is trying to be a score happy league, and you look at that as they've changed what you can do after a touchdown. And so obviously they have the traditional NFL
Yeah.
extra point of it's 15 yards, right? From the 15-yard line. It's 15 yards at the end.
So
And then you
15
can
yard
also
PAT,
15-yard
2 yard
PAT,
2 point, 10 yard
3 point.
3 point.
And yes, of course, the introduction of a 10-yard one play, 10-yard 3 point, which makes like it says in the graphic, a two-score game is an 18-point difference now instead of
Definitely will drive old heads away from the game. But
I mean, it'll make comebacks so much more dramatic. I mean,
yeah, I say let's move on to perhaps some not so positive things. What do y'all say?
there are a couple things. What would you mainly say, Tarun?
Like just like potential worries about the league. So like I would say like just take the XFL for example. The XFL had a lot of like, and this we'll keep this short, like keep the pod short. But I would just worry about like despite all these like attempts at offensive innovation, like a lot of these were implemented by the XFL, and they still were having very like a lot of 20 to 18 games, which like there's nothing wrong with those, but like I think especially for a startup league, you need as many 50 to 45, like almost Red River esque games, kind of drive up hype,
I what?
and then
Oh, hype. My bad. I can hear.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just
I
think
think.
like
I mean, I think like one thing that's not necessarily like any fault of USFL is that the XFL, which many say is a blueprint for the USFL, is coming back with leadership from Dwayne the Rock Johnson, amongst others, and support from the NFL as it looks to make it its feeder league. So I think that should the USFL have a relatively successful year this year, their long-term future might not be so certain.
yeah, because like if you're the XFL, right, it's like if you're having a deal with the NFL, maybe it's like fifth, sixth, and seventh round picks. Maybe it becomes like the G League where it's like say let me try let's
Baseball.
say take the DC Defenders, right?
Uh,
Let's say let's say the Commanders. That's a stupid damn name.
the Commanders. Oh,
Literally
yes.
the
Stay
that's
focused, Tarun.
that's the made in China version of the Transformers, and
No, Tarun, don't get distracted.
as
No.
Okay, Saru.
yeah, but like okay, let's go back
Continue
to
the
the main
analogy.
topic. But like yeah, let's take an example. Say if the Commanders draft some guy in the sixth round who like they think could have potential, but isn't quite there yet, right? And they don't want to say waste a roster spot on him. Say send him to the DC Defenders. I believe that was their name. All of a sudden, you have a fairly talented young athlete playing in the XFL that is exclusively available to the XFL.
You know what you're describing, right, Tarun? You're describing baseball. This is what minor leagues are for. If you
Yeah,
look
this
at
is
most
this is
Yeah,
this is
and
literally the minor league.
like yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I could not find the words.
but it's almost like more drastic in baseball because again, like almost all draft picks go straight to the minor leagues and develop. So we could look at it. We've been saying feeder system. Maybe it's a developmental league. Maybe it's like where we get to see like exciting college players go who and then not instead of getting wrecked by the curve that is the NFL. Some of them are able to more gradually adapt to professional football.
Just a quick note: only 324 athletes per year get invited to the combine, so meaning the draft, and out of that, only 259 get selected. So I think this is definitely would be like a minor league system or like a G League system in the future, with the way that if the product does not turn out well, this could definitely become that.
And
So
what
crazy to
was
think
the
about
numbers again?
though.
Like how many people did you say are drafted?
259.
So you got
That's with like
think about
There's
competition.
almost 100 players available for the
there's
XFL
bound
just
to
to
be
pick off.
there's bound to be of those drafted even there's bound to be hundreds over 100 over 100 maybe 150 players that aren't going to play on the
Cuts.
practice squad and may even be unemployed even though they were drafted. I mean most
Yeah,
players
seventh round pick don't mean nothing nowadays.
most players drafted rounds 4 to 7. I mean you talk about Brady but obviously that's an anomaly but most players drafted rounds
That's
4
the
to 7
exception, not the rule.
exactly don't really have great careers or career outlook. I don't know. So we'll see. I mean, it does provide an opportunity, the USFL and potentially the XFL. So we'll most definitely see because again, we will be covering this in the weeks coming forwards. We're back from our break. We'll be talking about the USFL a lot as the season progresses, starting on Saturday. Be pumping out content. We'll cover the draft as that comes up. So again, thank you for listening. I'm your co-host Nate Autry here with Tarun and Albie. And again, thank you for listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe.